The Kybalion, a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro, is a production of EI Publishing in association with EI Alliance, copyright 2018. Visit eipublishing.com for more. Music for this series is courtesy of New Threads, copyright 2018, from their self-titled album, available now. Hi, this is Julie Benetti again with...
Yeah, I'm Susan Barbaro, in case you didn't know.
And we are finishing our talk about the Kybalion, actually finishing the last part, the seventh principle, which is the principle of gender, as we just talk about, discuss, try to analyze from our own viewpoint and expanded viewpoints what this could all be about and how we can use it as a tool and resource to be sort of here and sort of not. And so with that, the principle of gender from the Kybalion by 3 initiates, the first part says, gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This is a important principle, yet sometimes it feels like a really simple one to me. Whereas you just consider, and it's not from the standpoint of sex, talking about, sex and what sex means, and even the sex definition of male or female, but from the standpoint of even androgyny, where everybody is both.
So I think that also is in alignment with everything we've talked about with polarity. Well, if we go to polarity and we go to rhythm, I mean, we do have male and female mental attributes, all of us. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that on the physical plane, there are attributes that relate to sex, mm-hmm. Obviously. But the importance, as I read through this principle, is that, the physical aspect of sex is on the physical plane. But if you get caught into thinking this is the difference, you'll lose it because it's a bigger idea behind it as it goes into the spiritual, the mental and the spiritual planes. Yet if you get, so it's almost like you can, unfortunately, we're more conditioned to the idea of just sex, be it, sexual organs and as well as the sexual act, and get caught in that. You have to kind of go, and get to that other space to be able to expand upon this principle further.
Right, and the specificity of the word gender, I guess, kind of pinpoints it to the fact of what they say in here, that no creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. And the power of everything and every person having the two elements.
Well, it also talks about creation. It really, and they refer to the female. And I'm going to try to, that the female is creation, generation, and regeneration. And that, and they talk about, when you go into more of the details, it talks about, like physically, they talk about proton, with a battery, they talk about the parts of the battery, saying it's called the negative charge, but the negative charge is really what creates. You have the positive charge and the negative charge, but it's the negative charge that receives and creates a new electrical particle. And so so what I get from that is it's and we go, so Julie and I also read further into the mental gender, because that's really where it's ultimately leading to. And that the idea of the masculine and the masculine is more the will, the power, and the feminine is, the feminine kind of takes that and creates something with it. So it's, if you think of it just from a purely, the masculine is the will, is the power. But on its own, it's nothing but just like a pure power. But it's the feminine that is able to actually take that power and create with it. So that's why it's in both. You can't have just one. It doesn't exist without the other.
Then there you go. You just explained the principle of duality. So there you go. So that kind of blends into it as well. And it's funny because to me, and it doesn't mean anything one way or the other, but this is such a simple principle, looking at gender, but not looking from the standpoint of what our definitions are. And it's really emphasizing the fact of the creation aspect of it, and that's what the principle is so important for, the creation of it and the generation of manifestation in all the planes, not just the physical. And yes, of course, like you said before, in the physical plane it gets transcribed into sex, and that's not where it stops.
Right.
It goes
it's
further
a great
than
start
that.
to understand that the two of them come together, and there's a creation. But if you stop there, it's almost like someone says A plus B equals C, and you're like, I got it. It's like, but wait a minute. C minus B has to equal A. And you stop at the A plus B equals C, and that's it. You feel like you're done. You get it. That's like the stepping stone to something huge, which is what I'm more interested in talking about, which is the mental, the mental gender. Which, if you can understand that, you can't create anything without, there can't be creation without the male and the female. Both are equally important. And so when you go into the mental gender, they describe the me as being, if you looked at yourself, you look at who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what you do for work, what you wear. That's the me. That's what they consider the female. And then, if I understand, then the will, the I, the more powerful part of you is the male. And so what happens is the male is the will. That's the powerful energy within you, or one part of your mind. The other part of your mind is the female, which takes the will from the male side of you and creates your thoughts, beliefs, mental images, and creates whatever you create. And so it's within us. And then but for most people, is what it says in the Kybalion, is that the male has been sort of, through laziness, has been kind of quieted. And the male energy from more powerful, quote, more powerful people interjects its will into the minds of other people.
And so in all that you said, which is great, you gave a great synopsis of the mental gender chapter, and it's a little bit dense from the fact of, if you can really consider the feminine principle of generating new thoughts and concepts and ideas and the imagination, and the masculine of doing the will, like you said, and there has to be a combination of both, and yet in the physicality of it, there's just the natural inclination to see one or the other, and not both.
I think I will go one step further and say that the both are going to interact, regardless if we choose to or not. The question is, which male? Is there going to be a gigolo that jumps into everyone's mind and gives the female the will of the I of someone else is going to come in and be a gigolo? Or are you going to enact your own I, your own higher self? And I think that you say that you need both, and I'm going to go a step further and say it is going to be both. There is no getting away from it. The question is, who's I, which is, again, do you think these are two parts of your mind? We're talking feminine and masculine. We're really not talking male and female. It's really masculine and feminine because it's two parts of your brain. And so when I say this and I say I, the masculine side, and I'm joking calling it a gigolo, yet it's really the masculine part of whose brain is going to impregnate the female part of the rest of everybody else's brain. Are we going to choose our own to do it, or is someone else going to come in and say, well, I'll just, you know, and I'm saying that it's going to happen. It's going to be one way or the other.
And you just gave a definition of the leader, the follower, and the A, you know, an A player, a B player, you know, an A actor in a movie, a B actor. And, you know, I think it's very powerful to ascertain that this is a principle of gender, and that there's no and, if, or but about it, that you have both. It's a given. And then you almost just take that in the palm of your hand and run with it with all the other principles. And those are incredible tools to change the way you live.
So when I think about it, I think of the me part of it, and I'm using the Kybalion's words, the me part of it, which they consider the female, which is the part that creates. That's, you know, I'd love to find that part in this book where they say it. They say it in a beautiful way, that the female part of the brain is the creator of our, where are you looking?
The feminine principle conducts the work of generating new thoughts, concepts, ideas, including the work of the imagination. The masculine principle contents itself with the work of the will in its varied phases. And yet without the active aid of the will of the masculine principle, the feminine principle is apt to rest, content with generating mental images which are the result of impressions received from outside, instead of producing original mental creations.
That right there says everything to me. And so the outside, well, what's the outside? If the male brain within us is not going to be activated, then it's gonna, the female brain is going to continue to make mental images. And so if we don't activate our own natural, inherent, intuitive brain, and I'm using my words, or you know, the words that Julie and I would use if we were talking about this. Julie understands, and it's not the Kybalion's words, it's really our words, but it's the part of your brain that connects with the greater, with everything. It's the part that is the intuitive part of all of us. And you know, it's science in the Kybalion, it says that science can't necessarily explain this, but we've been told over and over about the conscious and the subconscious and the unconscious. We have some, and so the question becomes the unconscious, or the, again, I look at it as the connector to everything, the part that you that psychic piece, intuitive piece, that if we don't activate that within us, our conscious brain, the feminine side, is going to continue to create, because that's what that brain does. And it's basically asking, are we going to take from our higher selves the truth that we know, or are we going to see what's outside, what other people have created, and are we going to take that as our truth? And if you don't activate that masculine form of your brain, the female the female form of the brain is going to do it anyways. So like Julie says, like, you know, you need both. And and like I said, guess what? No, not only do you need both, it's gonna occur. It's which do you choose? And so, you know, I just think that to me is like, it's not saying anything we haven't understood in the past.
Well, it's funny because when you say which do you choose, then you open it up to the fact that you have just more than just the male or the female, and it changes the definition of everything, and it brings in the principle of gender, and it brings in the absolute that there are both. You have both, and whether you say brain or mind or whatever you say, I mean, the way, you know, you put it into words, and the words that we use really gives an emphasis to I mean, what are the possibilities if you take that as a given? Because that's one of the laws to work with, to supersede and to, to propel beyond the laws.
And so one thing that I think of, because this came from Hermes Trismegistus. Oh, I'll get it. I mean, you also, as I look at these principles, they're also been explained in a way that we can understand it. So we call it male and female, or masculine and feminine, and yet that's not. I mean that's unfortunate, because it makes it feel like, well, male. Oh well, a male has this kind of a brain, and a female has that kind of a brain, and it's like, well, if I'm not embracing that male or masculine form, what's that about? You know what I mean? It's like, no, it's not really a male female. It's really to create your thoughts and beliefs. You need, and how else can we understand it other than a male and a female to create a child? You need a male and a female to create a child. And so if you look at your brain and what you believe and what you've come to understand, it comes from a process of the two parts of your brain. And so, maybe Hermes might have used a different description if there was a different way of explaining it. Yet the way that he described it as a male and female was actually quite brilliant, because it makes more sense. I'm like, so,
the funny part about what you just said is you could even say the opposite of it. Maybe what we took from what he described, we kind of, for lack of a better word, bastardize it and chose our own definition. And then in the physicality of it, it just becomes sex. And that's not what it is.
Right. Unfortunately, that's why I said, if you can understand it from a biological standpoint, yeah, of course it makes sense. You have a male, you have a female. And through the joining, that's how you create life. But if you stop there, you're missing the bigger point.
Yet the really funny thing too is that I'm not surprised, but it's not really mentioned in here unless I skimmed it too quickly, is that, there are a lot of, small organisms that have both within them, and that do their own creation and their own, they give birth within themselves, where they have both male and female organs. Asexual. So there's and so they give, so they have both. So there's an example right there, right in nature. And yet the implications of that, I mean, okay, they're not talking and they're not interacting in the physical world, but they are in their own way. I mean, I can't really say that. Maybe they do talk, I don't know. Yet, they are in their own way experiencing and are experiencing and living in the physical world, and they're recreating, and they're.
So I just think that for me, what's really, like, when Julie and I were talking, what we'd be doing is reading it and then, like, not talking until we turn on the computer and start recording this, because when I started thinking about that, it's like I can understand it. People talk about the conscious and the unconscious, subconscious and the unconscious, parts of the brain. And we've talked about it, and we have, what is it, the higher and the lower level. And they talk, if I go in the Kybalion, they give different descriptions of it. And since then, they've even given more. Yet it's hard to say which part of the brain does what, whatever. But if you think of it as pure energy from a higher, what do you want to do? Whatever you want to do, we can do. And then you have the other part of the brain that says, hey, let's do this. Oh, wow, this will be cool. Let's do that. Let's do this. And you understand that if you don't have that core that says, we'll come from a higher place, and there's, like, what do you do? What do you do? It's, it's like going on a dating app when, if you don't sit there and you don't look at the, pure energy of what's in front of you, and it doesn't appear, you go looking at a dating app, you start looking at what's out there to choose from. And it's kind of interesting.
And it is. And the funny part about that is that, again, I go back to, it's a very complex understanding to this principle, yet it's very simple. I mean, there you go. I mean, even Einstein said, the simplest thing in Occam's razor is the simplest solution, and the simplest, it's very simple, and it blends and interweaves so perfectly with all the other principles, and that we discussed.
And the other thing is that, if it's made simple and you can understand it, then you know it's real. If someone can't explain something and it gets so convoluted, because they don't know what they're talking about. And we're at least acknowledging that we're taking a step. We're not saying we know anything yet.
And we're not platforming ourselves as experts at all.
And again,
we're having a discussion, and from the discussion comes a really cool energy to enter into that we're sharing.
And in a further discussion, and appears from that. This is not an end all. This is interesting, and so it will be interesting to see where we go from there.
Thanks for joining us. This has been a production of EI Publishing in association with EI Alliance. Listen to other episodes and visit eipublishing.com for the transcript of this series as an ebook and to find more energized podcasts and books. Find New Threads self-titled album New Threads on iTunes, Spotify, Bandcamp, or at newthreads.us. Thank you for listening.